I did forget to ask, before we wrap up today, would you be able to show us, um, unlike Netflix, where a main account user can have multiple authorized users, would you be able to show us like individual uh, user sign-ins and how like the tokens would be stored separately for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can. Let me see. Let me go into this next portion of the lecture and then I'll dive back into that. All right. Let's go ahead and actually dive straight into this loader data, how that's going to work as far as managing our information. So currently we have everything inside of this use effect and it's returning our user. But this use effect is kind of janky because it's actually just it's rendering upon mount and it's actually allowing my entire application to mount before running this request. Ideally, I would want to know if a user is logged in or not prior to this even executing. Well, I do this within my router. In my router, there's another attribute that we can add to app called loader, where my loader data would be of get user. We know that's going to grab a user, and in return, it'll have something called email inside of it. All right, let's take a look at how the user utility works. The user utility will either return null or the email key, it looks like. Oh, nope, we're actually just returning a string of email. So let me fix that within my router. We just have the email string. All right, so there's my get user information. It's grabbing that email string. How do I fix that within the app? Well, within the app, let's take it step by step. Instead of calling get user here, I can call something like use loader data. Oh, that's from React. There you go. And this use loader data is going to actually give me access to the return value from the loader in the router. So instead of doing any of this, I can grab let user data or server user, which I think is what we had before, server user equal to use loader data. And then we could set the user to server user. All right, let's see what our application looks like now. Looks like we're going into an error here. Who's going to be called inside the body of a function component. Um, so it looks like the use loader data is not liking this application. So I'm going to grab it, bring it down here, and call this into a const. All right, so now we still have this BB being access to us. But notice that even though I'm refreshing, never once does it do that glitch where it's going in and out for my user, right? That's because my entire application, according to my router, my app is not going to render until this loader is resolved. So that's super useful for me because now instead of worrying about, hey, is this data empty or not, I can just simply add a loader stating you will not render the following element unless this has been resolved. All right. Well, let's clean up a little bit because we still have it inside of a use effect. I'm going to take off this use effect and I'm not even going to have this const of server user. I'm just going to use my loader data within the initial portion of the state. So now when the state is initialized, it will always be the user string or no. I can inspect, come over to my console, gonna clean this all out. I go to refresh. Notice there is no null. There isn't a single null statement that's showing up. It's strictly only showing me the initial value of the user, which is bb@bb.com. All right. So now that we were able to utilize the loader, I'm going to go ahead and pause here and ask if anyone has any questions regarding the loader functions, how that loader hooks works, or use loader data. All right. Doesn't seem like we have any questions. So let's start talking about the navigation process. For example, I can come over to my authentication page, even though there's a user already logged in. That's probably not something I want. I probably want to force the user to actually log out before they can do anything. All right. Well, how do I do that? Well, I need to reinforce the current location of the user. And this is where we'll utilize useEffect. So we're going to bring in a couple of hooks that we're already familiarized with. And then we're going to change the hook as well. So first, I'm going to establish an array called no users URLs. Now in this array, I want no users to be able to go to my authentication page. So my authentication page, if I take a look at the router, that is in index. And that's the only place where no user is allowed to go to as of right now. Well, now I can ask let is allowed be equal to no users URLs dot includes. And maybe I want to capture the current URL. I can say window dot URL. And this URL element, there you go, window dot location. Now the window location read-only property returns a location object with information about the current location. Let's see. Let's grab the path name. I believe that's going to give us some pretty good information. And let's actually add that into our use effect. I want to check where the current location is within the path name. And let's console.log that so that we can see it. Let's see what's going on. Okay, I'm going to go to inspect. Come over to my console. I can see the path name is of a single slash. At first it was undefined. Now it's giving me a slash. If I come over and I run tasks, you can see that tasks shows up. All right, so it's actually able to capture the current path where I'm located within the window. Well, what happens if I click on login? Well, this is going to give me an error. We expected to see that because I have just changed the logic for this button. So I'll have to fix that later on. All right, if I come over to tasks, so there I am within tasks. I have my entire project. Let me refresh it so we can see tasks. If I come back over to the task manager, it also shows me that it changed back to an empty path. So now I'm keeping track of the location. Now this window.location works. It's giving me the location of the path name, but it's not very React hook-like, right? We could actually run into some errors if we try to depend on this, if we try to depend on side of this window.location. Now, why? Well, if I'm utilizing something like React Router, remember React Router is changing those URLs dynamically, and we could run into the possibility where the window won't catch that the URL pattern has changed, even though we changed it through our router. Specifically when we're working with parameters being passed within the URL patterns, we want to make sure that we capture that. So we actually have to change this a little bit. We have to add another hook called use location. This allows us to call the location. It's the const location be equal to use location. And that's going to give us a more React router way to interact with this window.location. I can actually take that off now and replace it with location. All right, this is calling the location from use location, and we can grab the path name out of it. For us, it's not really going to represent a change. If I come over to tasks, we can see that task is present. And if I click there, we can see the change as well. So it kind of saves us a little bit more time and gives us direct access from the React router side. All right. Oh. So now I have my location set up and ready to go. I can actually check if that URL pattern is included in the no users. So this will evaluate to true or false. Well, now I can say, hey, if there is a user and is allowed. So if the current no users includes the path name, but I do have a user, then I want to navigate them. I want to get them out of here, all right? They shouldn't be within my authentication form. So I want to say, hey, I want you to redirect, and I want you to redirect over to tasks. And else, well, in the case that either one of those is missing, I would want to redirect them back to the authentication form. So if I have a user and they're within the authentication form, I want to send them back to tasks. Otherwise, if I don't have a user, I should send them back to the authentication form. And if they are not within the authentication form, it should redirect them back to the authentication. Right? Both of these have to be present in order for tasks to work. Okay. And notice how we're keeping track of location and the user. Now, this redirect portion, this isn't really a thing. It doesn't work. All right. Instead of redirect, I want to bring in use navigate and utilize that hook. So I want to say const nav be equal to use navigate. And now I can change this redirect to nav. All right. Let's see what this looks like now within my application. Okay, so it looks like it's running into some issues here where it's running back and forth, right? So I definitely messed something up inside of this else statement. I'm just going to go ahead and turn this into an else if and check, hey, if there is not a user and we're not in is allowed, then navigate to the tasks. This should control our flow. There you go. Now we don't have those issues. I can refresh. Everything's working well. If I try to go back to my authentication form, notice how it redirects me back to my tasks. I can click as many times as I want, but it's not going to allow me to actually go to my authentication form anymore. All right, if I try to remove this tasks and send it, it redirects me immediately back to tasks because I already have a user that's been logged in. All right. Does anyone have any questions over how we were able to enforce the user location within our application? Let's hear it, Tom.
Um, you'll have to bear with me. I forgot the actual name of it, but when we were going through React, we learned about link, and then there was another, um, maybe it was a hook. I don't recall off the top of my head, but we were able to basically programmatically redirect a user to a different page or whatever we wanted to. Why wouldn't we use that instead of this use navigate hook you showed us just now?
Got it. So the use navigate hook is the functional way of doing it. So if I'm writing straightly JavaScript code, then I would utilize hook. The link that you're referencing to, it's a component that we would utilize to represent anchor tags, right? So one of them is replacing HTML, while the other is giving us a programmatic way to redirect a user to a different location. Currently, the navigate function is giving us access to pure JavaScript, right? This is all in pure JavaScript. I am utilizing link down here in my brand to represent an anchor tag where I'm redirecting the user to the actual authentication location. Does that answer your question, Tom?
I think so. If I find the right name for it, I'll um, pop back up. But I'm trying to remember what it was called.
All right. Yeah, because link and nav, they're pretty distinct. I would have to see what you're referencing to in order to answer it appropriately. I apologize. All right. Well, let's actually work to the process of logging out a user now. We're able to log in a user. What about logging one out? Actually, we're not even able to log in a user. We're able to sign up a user. Let's do export const of logout. This is going to be an asynchronous request. It is not going to take in any parameters. And it will conduct the following. So now this logout function, it will grab the token. Oh, excuse me, it's actually going to remove the token from our local storage. And it will do that after we have logged out our user. So I'll say let response be equal to await API.post, where it's going to users/logout. Now let's take a look at what this response may look like. I'm going to come over to my server, come over to my user app, my views. Here's my logout function. And it looks like we're just not returning anything information. We're just returning a 204 null response when it's successful. All right. So with that said, we can come back over to our utilities file. And in our utilities file, we can check the response status. We'll say if response.status is equal to 204, then I want my local storage to remove an item where the key is of token. I want to delete from my headers. I want to delete my authorization header. And then I'm going to return null, which is for my user. Otherwise, I just want to alert, unable to log out, something went wrong. All right. So there's my logout function. Let's actually attach it to our button. I believe that's within app.jsx. Gonna come over to app.jsx. Here's my button, which is currently just setting the user to null. I'm going to actually create a function called handle click. Which is going to be an asynchronous function. It will then set the user to await my logout from utilities. And we can just call this to handle click. All right. So we can make sure that we receive that information. That should log out my user. And then by logging out my user, it should redirect me to my nav page because we have this use effect up above. So let's take a look at what my application does. I refresh my application. Okay, everything is still there. I can come over to the console. Nice. Nothing there to worry about. I can take a look at my application. And in my application, I still have the token available to me. And when I click on logout, let's start off at the console. Okay, looks like the user was set to null. If I come back over to my Django server, I can see a post request was accepted into API v1/user/logout. So that token has now been deleted. And if I take a look at my application, I no longer have the token within my local storage. All right, I have removed my token completely, and now I have to sign in a user. Does anyone have any questions regarding the logout function? All right, if no one has any questions, we can move forward to logging in a user. And we can log in a user by creating a utility that looks pretty similar to our signup view. I can say export const, which is login. That's going to take in an asynchronous request. It's going to take user credentials as an object. And then it's going to send a request. So I'll say let response be equal to 08. I'll say API.post, where the post is going to users/login. And we'll be sending the user credentials. All right, let's take a look at our view for login. My view for login should return this token key and the user as a string. There is the status as well that's coming back, so I can make sure that this was successful. Excuse me. So now in my utilities, I can run an if statement. I'll say if response.status is equal to 200, then do the following. Otherwise, alert response.data. So again, if my response.status was equal to 200, and then I also want to return null. All right, if my response.status is equal to 200, then I can actually grab my data. So we can say let, and we can grab my user and token from my response.data. I can pretty much grab the lines up above here. All of this information is going to be pretty much the same. Right? There's an opportunity for refactoring where we would manage the token by setting the token into our local storage. We would then sign up a user, or excuse me, we would then set the token into our headers and return the user. All right. Now, how does this fall within my authentication form? Well, in my authentication form, I have the following. I have my email, password, etc., etc. But I also have this checked parameter. Now, this checked parameter is what controls if I'm in a sign up form or not. So I can run the following logic. I can say if checked, then do the following. Otherwise, I want to have let user be equal to await login, where login is expecting credentials, where we have our email of email, and we have our password of password. Okay, once this comes back, we could set our user to user. And let's call this response user, just to make sure that this is a little bit cleaner. I don't like reusing variable names like that. All right. So there's our response user. We're setting it, and we're navigating to the task at the very end. Okay, so let's make sure this works. We were able to log out. I'm going to enter a user that I believe exists. I'm going to log in. Well, now we have fr@fr.com. We're able to interact with our site. I can refresh it all I want. If I inspect, I take a look at my console, or excuse me, my application. There's my token. I can log back out. All right, my token has been deleted, so I expect it to be something different. Log back in. The value of token changes. So everything's working properly. I have my entire authentication flow working now. The only thing that I still don't like is that this button of logout is showing up even when I'm already logged out. So I should probably fix that here shortly. All right. Let me just go ahead and add that final little line of code there. I'm going to go into my app.jsx. In this app.jsx, I have this logout button, but I only want this logout button to exist if my user is present. By doing that, my logout button is present. I can log out. Now there's no logout button. fr@fr, fr, and now my logout button comes back. So now my entire user flow is present. I can authenticate my user. I can manipulate what current URL they're present or what page they're currently viewing and control their flow. Does anyone have any questions over how we applied all of the different authentication methods, such as logging in, logging out, signing up, and confirming information? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so just an update. It was the same thing that we were talking about. The use navigate. That was the other thing I guess I was referencing to. I found it in the notes. Um, but the other question I had is kind of piggybacking off of the question I had the other day in authentication, to where we needed to provide a custom name within the authentication header, such as like bearer, etc. Is there a way to modify the uh, uh, common header that we're using in Django, or would we need to create a custom header in Django for that?
Are you talking about like the authorization header?
Yeah, I believe you did something like let me check the notes here. I think you did something like api.defaults.headers.common.
Yes.
It in that in those brackets, is that where we would change the name to be bearer? Or would we need to use like instead of .common like .custom or something?
Got it. Okay, perfect. So actually you would just switch this token here for bearer.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. It doesn't look like we have any questions. So now we're finally to the easy part, which is just actually conducting CRUD operations throughout the entire application. So, for example, we want to actually get all of our tasks, all right? Well, we want to export const, which is going to be get tasks. This is going to be an asynchronous function that will send requests where we have let data be equal to await API.post to tasks. And this is not a post request. I apologize. We're sending a get request. And then from there, we could return the data attribute. Now let's see what is actually coming back from data. I can come back over to my project. I'm no longer working with the user app, so I can close out those views. I'm now working with my tasks app. So in my task app, I can take a look at my views where I'm getting all of my tasks, and I should be getting back a list of objects. Well, currently, if I take a look at my tasks page, my task page is utilizing this task.json, which is just a bunch of mock data. I actually want to utilize the tasks that come in from my server. Well, we're going to add another loader function here because I don't want this page to load unless I have these tasks from my server. So I'll come back over to my router. I can close down my authentication form now because I won't need that. And I don't think I'll need app.jsx. I can come over to my loader. Here I have my authentication page, which we're already done with. And in my task, I can say, hey, loader will be of get tasks. So now my task will run. Once that data is provided to my task page, inside of my task page, I'm just going to change this to use loader data. And now it's going to be utilizing the data that is coming in from my API. All right, so we can see this get request is already being processed. Get API slash v1 tasks. And this is the actual tasks within my API. Well, what if I delete an item? If I refresh it, that item's continuing to come back. Why is that happening? Well, that's happening because when I delete an item, I'm not actually deleting it from my database. So every single time I refresh, it's making that call to my database and grabbing my tasks. So let's fix that. We're going to actually delete a task now. So currently I'm going to go ahead and come over to my React application. Going to go into my utilities. I'm going to say, hey, I want to delete a task. So I'll say export const delete a task. I'm going to make this equal to an asynchronous request that is going to take in an ID. I'm going to say let response is equal to await API.delete, where we're going to tasks slash, and I want to turn this into interpolated string. I apologize. Where I can include the ID. And let's see what actually comes back from those views. Well, when I send a delete request, I should expect there to be a 204. So let me go back over to my task, or excuse me, my utilities page. I can check the response.status. Or I can just simply return if response.status is equal to 204. Because if it is not 204, then it was unsuccessful. If it is a 204, then it was successful. And I can apply that to my task page. Well, in my task page, I have a delete a task. Oh, did I name them the same exact thing? Yes, I did. Let me rephrase this to remove a task. All right, so in my task page, I have this delete a task, which takes in this information. I have my deleted task, which is the one that's selected. Here, I'm just going to simply call. I'm going to turn this into an asynchronous function. And I'm going to call remove a task. I'll say if await remove a task, where I pass in my delete task.id, then I want the following to happen. Let's make sure this works. I've refreshed my page. I'm going to go ahead and open up the inspector tools to make sure nothing is broken. Okay, when I click on delete code, it's removed from my files. If I take a look at my server, a delete request was just processed. And if I go to refresh my browser, you can see that the task was removed. All right, I was able to delete a task. We're kind of going into the CRUD operations now. So far I have read, I have delete. Now we just need to focus into create and update. So let's work on this update method first. So here's my update task portion where I'm passing in my updated task. Let's go ahead and go into my utilities. Let's do export const and do rewrite task, which is going to be an asynchronous function that takes in an ID. This will grab a response, which will await a request to API.put, where we're sending in tasks/ID. All right. This will then take in a body of a request. And actually, for this rewrite task, I'm going to take the entire task object. So then that way, when I return the body, I can just return tasks. And I can just leave an annotation here where I expect task to be equal to a title, a completed status, and I believe that's all I should need. Let me check my views here. So here's my put request, which grabs the task, updates partially. Okay, great. And it is just the title and the completed status that it's going to need. Awesome. So there's my utility now. If this is successful, it's going to actually return a brand new task with all of the updated values. So in my utilities, I can always just return response.data. Or I can even change this to save myself some syntax, graph data, and just return data. All right. A little bit of syntactical sugar that I'm doing here. I can now come over to my task page and apply that to my updated task method. So I can say, hey, updated task. I apologize. I need to turn this into an async method. Currently, I'm grabbing an entire updated task object. So I can just say, hey, I want updated task, or excuse me, rewrite a task to take in the entire updated task object. If this is successful, so I probably want to check that this is successful, but I'm currently just returning the entire data attribute. I think it's okay to keep it with the logic that we have here. And I can just say updated task is equal to await and do some variable reassignment there. That way, when this part gets executed, it can actually update appropriately. Well, let's see what this looks like. From my application side, if I refresh, currently sleep is completed. Let me go ahead and change this eat. I want to change eat to completed, and I want to actually update it. Well, now eat is still showing up incomplete, so it looks like we have a reference error. So ID is not defined inside of my updated task. Update task prop. Right. Let's take a look at what happened there. So we grab the updated task that goes to rewrite. I'm going to come over to my utilities. Oh, here you go. This is where my error is coming in from. It needs to be task.id. The request was never even sent. Okay, refresh. I'm going to change this again to completed. Click on update. It's now showing up as completed. If I refresh, you'll see that both sleep and eat are completed. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Let's do lift, and instead of lift, I'm going to do it's leg day for quads, and it's still incomplete. We can see that it's executed. It still shows leg day for quads. And if I refresh, I still have leg day for quads as well. If I take a look at my server, there was a put request that was received, and then a get request that was processed when I refreshed the page. All right, so there's my update method. Gonna take a quick pause here. Does anyone have any questions about the read, update, or delete methods? All right, doesn't look like there are any questions. So the last part is to actually write a method. So I'm going to say export const, which is going to be write a task. And we're going to make this into an asynchronous request. It's going to take in a task object. And it's going to conduct the following. I'll say let data be equal to await API dot post, where we're going to be speaking to tasks and send in the task object. Now let's take a look at the views as to how this is processed. In my views, I'm receiving a post request to my all tasks. I'm taking care of the entire user ID, so I don't have to worry about that. Setting the data, validating, and then either returning errors or the data itself. So there's a little bit of manipulation that I may want to do there. Let me come over to my utilities. I'm going to actually grab status as well. Now say if status is equal to 201, because I created something, then I want to return data. Else, I'm actually going to want to alert the data because that's going to be all of my errors. And I want to return null. All right, so there's my write a task method. And I don't even think I have to worry about this return null. Actually, why not? Let's return. All right. Now, I do have a component called create a task form. You can see that it grabs a brand new task. We don't need to worry about this ID process because it's going to generate the ID for us. So I can set this new task be equal to an asynchronous request. where I'm going to await for write task to process the following. And I don't even need to add this completed is equal to false because I have a default value there. All it really needs is the task title. All right. From there, I can say, hey, if there is a new task, because it's either going to return an object or null, then I can add the task. And regardless whether it was successful or not, I always want to reset that input field. All right, so there's my added task value. Let me go ahead and come over to my form. Gonna go ahead and refresh. Okay, all of my update and delete methods are completed. I can edit. I'm starting to get kind of hungry, so I'm gonna go ahead and update this. All right, still incomplete. Everything's great. And the other thing that I want to add is code more React because getting listy. All right, I go to click on this submit button. I can see code more React was processed. Let's take a look at our different user messages. All right, that's a warning and another warning. No errors are currently present, which is weird because it's showing it as an error. I can see that a post request was processed. And if I go to refresh my site, we can see sleep, eat, leg day for quads, and then code more React. Well, I feel a little bit refreshed now after doing this application, so I can update it to show completed. And there's my put request to complete my function. Again, I can log out, log back in. There are all of my tasks. I can log out, create a new user. I don't have an account, so this is XX. I'm going to sign up my user. Currently, that user doesn't have any tasks. There's my first task. Here's my second task and my third. I can refresh my application and it's always going to show me the same information. I can edit and I can delete. Oh, let me edit this one. And there's my entire full stack CRUD application. Does anyone have any questions over any of the material that we covered in today's lecture? Let's hear it, Tom.
Yeah, could you give us some insight on when to use um, HTTP response versus just response? Because I know you said the JSON response is kind of outdated now. Um, so when's the trigger to switch between those two?
When you're working with your API itself, I would recommend always utilize the response object that comes from REST framework. If you're talking about purely Django without any Django REST framework, meaning that you're not creating an API, you're creating some sort of other algorithm or some sort of other functionality for the server. Um, if you are returning specifically JSON objects, or you want your object responses to always be JSON serializable, let's say you're creating an API, but you're doing it without REST framework, I would always utilize JSON response because that will create a reinforcement. It will make sure that whatever is being sent on that response is always JSON serializable. Right?
Oh, sorry. I just meant to say like I knew like the JSON response was kind of like outdated. The real question was is the difference between just response versus HTTP response. Because I thought there you made a very specific entry to where it was HTTP response versus just response.
Yes, and let me show you that entry here. So if I come over to my project URL patterns, the main reason why I utilize this HTTP response, and that is happening here inside of my URLs, why I return connected. I'm specifically utilizing HTTP response because this is just a functional view, right? So because I have a functional view and I don't have a REST framework API view, I can't use response. If this was a REST framework API view, then I could utilize response from REST framework. But because this is just a regular functional view, I have to depend on the tools given to me by Django. So I'm utilizing HTTP response just to send a singular string because a singular string isn't JSON serializable. Otherwise, I would use JSON response.
Got it.
All right. Well, before we end today's lecture, let me do a quick recap over everything that we covered today. To start off, we did a couple of manipulation to our server where we actually installed Django course headers. After installing course headers, we actually put the course headers app into install apps, added the course headers middleware into our middleware, and we specified which origins are allowed to make requests. Currently, we're saying all origins are allowed to make requests. Ideally, we would want to isolate that. Right? We would want to have something where we have a list of things that are allowed to make requests. If we want to see an example of that, let's say I want to lock this down. It's no longer a public API. People are only allowed to talk to me through my development server. So my development server would be at localhost port 5173. I believe that's what it is. Let me make sure. And let me check here. Yep, 5173. All right, so that's the only port that would be allowed to speak to me. And now, if I come over to my application, you can see that all of my requests are still coming through. I can still send information. So let's do first task. And my responses are still being rendered. Everything's coming from port 5173. Right? This is just another way of specifying it. If I had a different application running on a separate port, it would block that communication. All right, so there's everything for my setting or for my project that we did. Inside of our client application, which is where most of our work was conducted, we created a series of utilities. First, we wanted to confirm that we could actually speak to our API. So we created this test connection portion. Let me remove this data. Then we actually created an instance of Axios. That way we could save our time when it comes to prepending a URL. Now, this is also going to be important for production because once you actually deploy your server is not going to be living inside of HTTP 127.001 or whatever address your local server is running on, right? If you don't create an instance of Axios when you go into deploy, you're going to have to hunt down every single instance in your application where you actually communicated with your API and change the string manually. All right, by creating this API instance, there's only one place where you have to change it, and that way you don't have to do any hunting whenever you're actually deploying your app. Then we have our get user information, where we check if there is a token currently within the storage. If so, we set it to our authentication headers, and then we send a request to our API to get back our user data. In our sign up form, we send a post request with the user object. We check if this returns a status of 201. If it does not, we alert the response.data. If it does, we're console.logging the data, which we don't really need this console.log, so I'm going to remove it. We then grab the user and the token, set the token to our local storage, set the token to our API headers, and return the user. Login looks very similar, where if our response is of 200, we grab our user and token, set the token to our local storage, set the token to our API headers, and return the user to our application. Logout checks if the response was successful by checking the status code. If so, we remove the token from our local storage, delete the authorization header from our API instance, and return null for our user. We have our get tasks. This is going to the CRUD capabilities, where we're reading all of the tasks. Here we have our create method, which is where we're writing a tasks. We're sending the request, making sure it's 201. If so, we return the data. Otherwise, we alert the errors that are being returned and return null. Here we have a remove a task method where we're taking in the ID of a task to be able to remove the task from our database. And here we have our rewrite, which is our update method. We're sending a put request to the corresponding ID with the correct task body, where we have either title or completed. And then we return the updated task. All right. At this point, does anyone have any questions over any of the material that we covered today? Awesome. It doesn't look like we have any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and open up another browser window here. And, oh, did I crash my, yeah, I did. No, I didn't. All right. So I have another browser window that's now available to me. I'm going to bring it over. And in this browser window, I'm actually going to come over to tasks. And I think this is what you were referencing to, Tom. All right, so I come over to this browser window and I'm getting a 401. Request failed with status code 401. Let's see what this is from. Oh, nice. It looks like Axios isn't supported by Safari, which is interesting because I definitely did not expect that to be a thing. Let me see, node modules, read dependencies, Axios. Yep. Oh, I apologize. I'm getting a 401 unauthorized. That's the error. It's not that Axios isn't supported. Let me come over to my application tab somewhere as soon as I can find it. I am not familiar with Safari's developer tools, unfortunately. Here you go, storage. Boom. So it looks like there was a token there from a previous example. Let me go ahead and refresh this. That's why we got that 401 unauthorized. Uh, it looks like there's a whole API header here that's currently working. I wonder why we're returning that 401 unauthorized. Let me check here. Okay, API tasks, unauthorized, broken pipe. Let me crash the server, run it again. I'm gonna crash my front end server and run it again as well. Try to figure out what's going on here. Okay, I can refresh it. That one is fine. But if I refresh this one runs into an error where it's 401 unauthorized. And it could be because of my course. Let me change my course values one more time. Actually, it shouldn't be, but just in case. Okay, course allow all origins be equal to true. Let that compile one more time. All right, refresh. Let me refresh. What is going on with you? equals 51, known modules, axios. You're not telling me why though. There's nothing in cookies. Interesting. So if it goes there, it works. But if I come over to tasks, I get a 401 unauthorized. Is that the same thing here? Oh, it is the same thing there. Okay, so that's a different error that I'll have to deal with here shortly. All right. Let's see. All right. So currently, I can log in into FR, and hopefully this will give me my user. What is going on with you now? I broke it. I broke it hard. Let me say, failed to load server. Well, they shouldn't be sending it to sign up. It should be sending it to sign in. Okay, so key of username. I expected that. Let's see. That should be happening within my auth form. That should be checking my checked value. So because it is not checked, it should be sending login. Request fail status 500. Still sending it to sign in. All right, let's see. What could the error be here? So if checked, it's going to sign up. Otherwise, it's going to log in. Check login. Login, users.login. Key of username F4 already exists, which is what I expect. It's just sending it to the wrong URL endpoint, but the correct URL is there. I may have to debug this. I apologize, everyone. I'm not sure what exactly broke it. Let me check my application. All right, everything is good there. Okay, so now it worked. Let's see what my console was telling me. Okay, I would call the following error during type error cannot read properties of undefined when it comes to map. Yeah, I'm gonna have to debug this and get back to everybody. I apologize. Let's go ahead and take a good 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and I'll try to demonstrate that multiple users. I apologize, Tom. All right, let me go ahead and stop our recording here. All right. Well, if we take a look, the only thing that I really changed here is this get task. We're running into an error where the 401 unauthorized was actually raising an error. It wasn't letting this function just continue. As soon as this error was raised, it was killing our functionality, and React Router was sending us an error message. We had to wrap it all instead of a try and catch block to catch the error and make a new return value for all these tasks. That way it can handle our user navigation. So everything's back now. My entire application is working. I was running into some issues earlier. It's just part of the nature of the beast when it comes to development servers. I strongly recommend wrapping everything inside of an Nginx container or utilizing gUnicorn whenever you're hosting your Django application. So that's just some things to look into as you're working through your personal project. Right, so here's fr@fr.com. I can log in with FR. There's my user currently available to me. I can come over on the right-hand side, view XX at xx.com. Sure, why not? Take my fingerprint. This might make it easier. And then we log in, and there's my other user of XX. All right. I can still create a new task. This is a new task. Create that. You can take a look at my Django server. There's a post request that was sent. I can refresh this. There's a get request that was sent. I can delete sleep. There's my post request that deleted sleep. And I can delete a task. And there's my post request. Everything is still working correctly. I can now log out, refresh this as many times as I want. I can go to an improper URL address. Let's say I come over to tasks and they'll redirect me to the appropriate page. Same thing here. Let's say I try to come over to just single slash for my authentication form. It redirects me to my tasks. So now I have two browsers, each one of them handling their own user. All right, if I go over here and I go to XX, why not? I can log in. I can go into inspecting my elements, come over to my storage, and under local storage, we can see that I have the token and a key. I can do the same thing on my Chrome browser. Come over to my storage, or excuse me, to my application, and check my local storage. And you can see that here on my local storage, I have a token and a key. Right, so both of these are working. They're working in the same exact manner. I have multiple users logged in. They're just in separate browsers. Right, just like if I were utilizing something like Netflix or Facebook, if I was on a separate browser, I would have to re-log in. Right, and I can log back out, log out. I can exchange the users. Let's say I want to do XX here. At XX. And I want to do FR at FR. You can see that everything is interchangeable. All the data is coming from my server and shared across both resources. Did that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, that did.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions? Let's hear it, Chris.
Yeah, I was just curious, would there be any modifications to say like you're calling to making a call to Poke API and the user decides to save like one of the Pokemon to the database or something? Because most of what we've been messing with is like just I guess not API data, but just raw data that we input there, or just like I know with the Django, it was just with Django, we're just messing with the JSON or the fixture data in there. If the user wanted to save like I don't know some Pokemon, would the credit operations still be the same, or would there be any modifications to that?
The core
I don't know if
operations will be the
that's
same. Yeah. So as far as like capturing the data, that's really what you want to worry about. What is it that they want to save about this Pokemon, right? Whether they want to save a file, do they want to save a JSON object, and how does that JSON object relate to your model on your database? If as long as your model and as long as your serializer has everything it needs to be able to create an instance, then all you need to do is send that object, right? And that object would just be captured from the front end and then sent to your server. Does that answer your question, Chris?
yeah, it does. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Awesome. It doesn't seem like we have any questions. That's going to conclude our lecture for today. So let me go ahead and stop our recording here.